The first thing you should know about me is that I'm not the type of woman who goes through her fiancé's laptop. I believe in trust, communication, and giving people the benefit of the doubt. But when Marcus left his MacBook open on our kitchen counter with a hotel confirmation email glowing on the screen, for a weekend I distinctly remembered him telling me he was visiting his sick grandmother. Well, even the most trusting woman has her limits. My name is Alexandra Chen, though everyone calls me Alex, and 2 weeks ago I thought I had my entire life figured out. At 28, I was the marketing director at a promising tech startup, pulling in six figures while my fiancé Marcus struggled to break into senior development roles. We'd been together for years, engaged for 2, and I'd been planning our engagement party with the meticulous attention to detail that had made me successful in my career. The engagement party. God, I'd spent months planning that thing. Booked the rooftop venue at the Meridian Hotel, sent out invitations to 120 guests, hired a photographer, coordinated with caterers. I'd even created a slideshow of our relationship milestones that I planned to show during the toasts. Marcus had seemed distracted during the planning, but I'd chalked it up to work stress and pre-wedding jitters. I should have known better. That Tuesday evening, staring at the laptop screen, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The email was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Rivera, except I wasn't Mrs. Rivera yet, and I certainly hadn't been at the boutique hotel downtown last Saturday night. My finger trembled slightly as I scrolled through his messages, and what I found there shattered every assumption I'd made about my life. Her name was Sophia Lawson, 25, a junior developer at Marcus's company, with long dark hair and the kind of bright smile that looked genuine in every photo. The text thread between them went back 6 months, and reading through it was like watching my relationship dissolve in real time. Missing you already, from 3 days ago. After another weekend I thought he'd spent with his college buddies. Can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore, from last month. And the one that made my hands shake. I told her we're just friends. She doesn't suspect anything. The engagement is just for appearances. You know how these arranged business relationships work. Arranged business relationships. For years of my life, reduced to a convenient financial arrangement. I sat back in our kitchen chair, the same chair where I'd excitedly shown him venue options for our engagement party, and tried to process what I was seeing. Marcus wasn't just cheating, he was living an entirely different life. To Sophia, I was some pathetic woman who was financially supporting him while he played house with his real girlfriend. She had no idea we were actually engaged, actually planning a wedding, actually sharing a bed every night. The worst part? I'd been paying for it. Literally. Going through our shared credit card statements, I found charges for romantic dinners, weekend getaways, even jewelry I'd never received. He'd been using my money to court another woman while telling her I was just a convenient roommate. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you. I stared at those words until they blurred. Most women would have confronted him immediately. Screamed, thrown things, demanded explanations. But I didn't get to where I am in my career by making emotional decisions. In marketing, timing is everything. You don't launch a campaign half-prepared, and you certainly don't waste a good crisis. So instead of confronting Marcus, I did what I do best. I made a plan. The engagement party was in 10 days. 120 guests, including both our families, our friends, and, most importantly, Marcus's co-workers. Including Sophia, who I now realized was the mysterious, new team member he'd mentioned might stop by the party. And including David Kane, Marcus's boss and the CEO of their company. David. I'd met him several times at company events and business networking functions. He was 35, recently divorced, and had always been friendly in a professional way that suggested he might be interested in something more if circumstances were different. He was everything Marcus wasn't. Established, confident, successful in his own right. I'd always found him attractive but had never acted on it, being committed to Marcus. Well, circumstances had just changed dramatically. I closed Marcus's laptop and walked to our bedroom, where our engagement photo sat on the nightstand. We looked happy in it, or at least I looked happy. Looking at it now, I could see the distance in Marcus's eyes, the way his smile didn't quite reach them. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found David's number. We'd exchanged information months ago when I'd helped coordinate a marketing collaboration between our companies. David? It's Alex Chen. I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted to discuss a business proposition with you. Are you free for coffee this week? His voice was warm, surprised, and definitely interested. Alex, of course. I always have time for you. How about Thursday afternoon? Perfect. That would give me 3 days to prepare my pitch, and 6 days to execute the most important campaign of my life. As I hung up, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked the same as I had an hour ago, but everything had changed. The woman looking back at me wasn't the trusting fiancé who'd been planning her dream wedding. She was a strategist who'd just identified her target market and was about to launch the most personal product of her career, revenge, served publicly, with a side of poetic justice. Marcus wanted to play games? Fine. But he'd forgotten who he was playing with. I hadn't built a successful career by accepting defeat gracefully. The engagement party was going to be everything I'd planned for and more. Thursday afternoon found me sitting across from David Kane at Café Lumiere, our city's go-to spot for business meetings and discreet conversations. I'd chosen a corner table, dressed professionally but not formally, navy blazer, silk blouse, the kind of outfit that suggested this might be business, but could easily transition to something more personal. David looked good. He always did, but today I was seeing him through different eyes. Where Marcus was boyish and uncertain, David had the quiet confidence that comes from actually achieving success rather than just talking about it. His divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, and while I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that it had been messy, he carried himself like a man who'd learned from his mistakes rather than being broken by them. So, he said, settling back in his chair with his coffee. What's this business proposition? I have to admit, I'm intrigued. I'd rehearsed this conversation, but sitting across from him, I realized I didn't need to be quite as calculated as I'd planned. There was genuine warmth in his eyes when he looked at me, something I hadn't seen from Marcus in months. It's about market positioning. I began, which was technically true. Sometimes a product isn't performing well not because there's anything wrong with the product itself, but because it's been positioned incorrectly in the market. David nodded, his business instincts engaged. Go on. And sometimes, I continued, leaning forward slightly, the best strategy is to completely rebrand, find a market that actually values what you're offering. Something shifted in his expression. David hadn't become a successful CEO by missing subtext. Are we still talking about business, Alex? I met his eyes directly. We're talking about recognizing value where others have failed to see it. The silence stretched between us, charged with possibility. Finally, David spoke, his voice quieter than before. Alex, I have to ask, is everything okay with you and Marcus? This was the moment. I could deflect, keep things professional, maintain the facade that my relationship was solid. Or I could take the first real step toward dismantling the life Marcus thought he was so cleverly managing behind my back. Marcus is about to learn a very important lesson about market research, I said. Specifically, about knowing your audience before you make assumptions about their intelligence. David's eyebrows rose. Sounds like he's underestimated his target demographic. Catastrophically. We talked for 2 hours. Ostensibly about business, but really about everything else. David told me about his divorce, how his ex-wife had married him for his potential rather than loving him for who he was, how she'd grown resentful when success meant long hours rather than just increased social status. I found myself telling him about my frustrations with Marcus, though I kept the details vague. The way Marcus seemed to take my support for granted, how he'd grown comfortable letting me carry the financial and emotional weight of our relationship. You know, David said as we prepared to leave, I've always admired your strategic thinking. The campaign you ran for the product launch last year was brilliant, turning a potential weakness into a competitive advantage. Sometimes the best strategies are the ones no one sees coming, I replied. He walked me to my car, and as I unlocked the door, he touched my arm gently. Alex, whatever's going on, I want you to know that you deserve someone who sees your worth. All of it. The way he said it, looking directly at me, made something flutter in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Not the desperate butterflies of new attraction, but the deeper recognition of being truly seen by someone who understood what they were looking at. "David," I said, making a decision that would change everything. "I'm having an engagement party next Saturday. Marcus would love for you to come." He looked puzzled, as well he should. "An engagement party?" "Trust me," I said, getting into my car. "It's going to be a celebration no one will forget." The next week flew by in a blur of final preparations. I confirmed every detail of the party setup, made some strategic additions to the guest list, and spent considerable time perfecting my slideshow presentation. Most importantly, I did something I'd never done before. I researched my competition. Sophia Lawson's social media profiles painted a picture of a sweet, somewhat naive young woman who genuinely believed she was in love. Her Instagram was full of artfully cropped photos that I now realized featured Marcus's hands, his apartment, our apartment, his favorite restaurants. She'd been living in the Instagram version of my life, completely unaware that she was the other woman in her own love story. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. By Friday night, I had everything in place. The slideshow was loaded and tested, the venue was confirmed, and I'd even bought a new dress, red, because I was about to paint the town with Marcus's humiliation, and I wanted to look the part. Marcus came home that evening in an unusually good mood, probably because he thought he was about to pull off the social event of the year without his double life being exposed. He found me in the kitchen, putting finishing touches on the seating chart. "Everything looks perfect, babe," he said, kissing the top of my head. "I can't believe we're finally doing this." "Neither can I," replied, and I meant it. In less than 24 hours, Marcus Rivera was going to discover what happened when you underestimated Alexandra Chen. "You seem different lately," he said, studying my face. "More confident, maybe?" "It's sexy." I smiled up at him. This man who'd been lying to me for 6 months while using my credit card to finance his affair. "I've just been thinking about the future. About what I really want." "And what's that?" "To be with someone who actually deserves me." He laughed, completely missing the edge in my voice. "Well, you've got that. Lucky me, right?" "Lucky you," I agreed. That night, as Marcus slept peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about his secret girlfriend, I stared at the ceiling and ran through my plan one final time. Every detail was accounted for, every contingency considered. I'd learned long ago that the difference between a good strategy and a great one was the ability to turn your opponent's strengths against them. Marcus thought his greatest strength was his ability to compartmentalize, to keep his world separate. Tomorrow night, he was going to discover that it was actually his greatest weakness. Because while he'd been busy managing his double life, I'd been doing what I do best, preparing to launch a campaign that would redefine the entire market. And this time, the product I was launching was my own freedom. Saturday evening arrived with a kind of perfect weather that made you believe the universe was conspiring in your favor. The rooftop venue at the Meridian Hotel glowed in the golden hour light, fairy lights twinkling between elegant floral arrangements I'd spent weeks perfecting. 120 guests mingled with cocktails, the buzz of conversation mixing with the jazz quartet I'd hired for ambience. I stood near the entrance in my red dress, a strategic choice that photographed beautifully and commanded attention, greeting guests as they arrived. Marcus worked the room beside me, playing the part of the devoted fiancé with an enthusiasm that might have been touching if I didn't know he was mentally calculating how many hours until he could text Sophia about what a burden this all was. "You look stunning tonight," David said when he arrived, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His eyes held mine for just a moment longer than strictly appropriate, and I felt that flutter of genuine attraction again. "Thank you for coming," I replied, letting my fingers brush his as I handed him a drink. "I promise you, this will be a night to remember." Marcus appeared at my elbow, extending his hand to his boss with the slightly desperate enthusiasm of a man trying to impress. "David, so glad you could make it. Alex insisted we invite you." "Wouldn't miss it," David replied smoothly. "Congratulations, Marcus. You're a lucky man." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. As the evening progressed, I watched Marcus grow increasingly comfortable, even cocky. He'd managed to keep his world separate for 6 months. What could go wrong now? He had no idea that Sophia was standing by the bar, looking confused and slightly overdressed for what she'd been told was a company celebration. I'd watched him carefully avoid her section of the party, but she kept glancing around, clearly wondering why she was the only person from their company besides David who'd been invited to what was obviously an engagement party. By 9 o'clock, the crowd had settled into the rhythm of the evening. Both sets of parents had arrived and were holding court with their respective friends. Marcus's college buddies were getting progressively louder at their cocktail table, and my girlfriends were already asking when I was going to start the slideshow they'd heard so much about. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, tapping my champagne flute with a fork. The crowd quieted, turning toward the small stage area where I'd had the AV equipment set up. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate Marcus and me." Applause rippled through the crowd. I caught sight of David near the back, his expression attentive and slightly curious. Sophia had moved closer to the front, probably thinking this was her chance to understand what was really going on. "When Marcus and I started dating 4 years ago," I continued, advancing the first slide of my presentation, "I thought I'd found my perfect match. Someone who shared my values, my commitment to honesty, my belief that a relationship should be built on mutual respect and transparency." The screen behind me showed a photo of Marcus and me from our first date, both of us laughing at something I could no longer remember. The crowd made appreciative sounds. "I was so naive then," I said, clicking to the next slide. "I actually believed that when someone said they loved you, they meant it exclusively." This slide showed Marcus's text thread with Sophia from 3 months ago. "Can't wait to wake up next to you instead of her." The first murmur of confusion went through the crowd. Marcus, who had been smiling indulgently from his position near the family tables, suddenly looked like a man who'd just realized he was standing in quicksand. "See, what I learned about Marcus," I continued conversationally, as if I were discussing the weather, "is that he has a very flexible relationship with the truth. For instance, when he told me he was visiting his sick grandmother last weekend." Click. Hotel receipt for the boutique hotel, clearly showing 2 guests. He was actually here in our city, at a romantic getaway. But not with me. The crowd was dead silent now. I could see Marcus frantically looking around, probably calculating escape routes. His mother had her hand pressed to her throat in horror. "I have to give Marcus credit for his organizational skills," I said, clicking through a rapid succession of slides. "He managed to maintain 2 completely separate relationships for 6 months. That takes dedication. Here he is with his actual girlfriend, Sophia Lawson." The screen filled with photos I'd pulled from Sophia's Instagram, carefully cropped images that I'd enhanced to show Marcus's face, his hands, his apartment. "Our apartment." Sophia gasped audibly from the front of the crowd. She was staring at the screen in horror, finally understanding that she'd been the other woman in her own love story. Marcus told Sophia that I was just a friend, he was helping out financially. I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. Which was partially true. I was helping him financially. I was paying for their dates, their hotel rooms, even the jewelry he bought her. Funny how generous you can be with someone else's credit card. Marcus finally found his voice. "Alex, stop this. We can talk about this privately." I looked at him with a smile I reserved for particularly obtuse clients. "Oh, but Marcus, you love public displays of affection. You had no problem posting photos with Sophia all over social media. Why would you want to keep this private?" "Because this is insane," he snapped, his composure finally cracking. "Yes, I made mistakes, but airing our personal business like this." "Personal business?" I interrupted. "This stopped being personal business the moment you made me unknowingly complicit in funding your affair. This became public business when you decided to humiliate me systematically while lying to everyone in our social circle." I clicked to the final slide, which showed a timeline of our entire relationship overlaid with his affair timeline. Every lie, every work emergency, every weekend with his college buddies was mapped out in precise detail. "So here's the thing," I said, setting down my champagne flute and walking closer to the crowd. Marcus has clearly found his true love, and I refuse to stand in the way of that happiness. Which is why I'm officially ending our engagement. I slipped off my engagement ring and set it on the nearest cocktail table. The sound of it hitting the glass was audible in the absolute silence. But I didn't invite you all here just to witness a breakup. I continued. I invited you here to witness a new beginning. Because while Marcus was busy with Sophia, I discovered what it felt like to be truly valued by someone who actually deserves me. I turned toward the back of the crowd, where David stood frozen with what I could only describe as fascinated horror. "David Kane," I said, extending my hand toward him. "Would you join me up here?" Every head in the room swiveled toward Marcus's boss. David looked like a man who'd just been asked to defuse a bomb, but after a moment that felt like an eternity, he began walking toward me through the parted crowd. When he reached me, I took his hands in mine and looked up into his eyes. "David, I know this is unconventional, but I've learned that life is too short to waste time on people who don't appreciate what they have. You've shown me more genuine care and respect in 1 week than Marcus has in months. So I have to ask." I dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring box I'd bought that afternoon. The crowd gasped collectively. "David Kane, will you marry me?" The silence stretched so long I could hear car horns from the street 15 floors below. David stared down at me, his expression cycling through shock, understanding, and something that looked suspiciously like admiration. Then he started to laugh. Not mockingly, but with genuine amusement and appreciation for the sheer audacity of what I'd just done. "Alexandra Chen," he said, taking the ring box from my hands and kneeling down beside me. "You are the most magnificent, terrifying, brilliant woman I have ever met. And yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto my finger, pulled me to my feet, and kissed me in front of 120 stunned guests while camera phones flashed and Marcus stood paralyzed by the magnitude of his social and professional destruction. When we broke apart, the crowd erupted. Some people were applauding, others were clearly scandalized, and more than a few were already posting to social media. But David was looking at me like I'd just performed a miracle, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Marcus, meanwhile, was staring at us with the expression of a man who just watched his entire life collapse in real time. Which, to be fair, he had. The week following what would forever be known in our social circle as the engagement party massacre was a masterclass in consequences. Monday morning brought a cascade of reactions that rippled through every aspect of our lives like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. Marcus didn't come home Saturday night. Or Sunday. By Monday, his belongings were gone, leaving only a handwritten note on our kitchen counter. "I'll be staying with friends until I figure things out. We need to talk." I crumpled it up and threw it away without responding. We'd had 4 years to talk. He'd chosen to spend 6 months of that time talking to Sophia instead. The corporate fallout was swift and brutal. David, to his credit, handled the situation with a kind of professional grace that reminded me why he'd been successful in business. By Tuesday morning, Marcus had requested a transfer to their Austin office, which David approved with what I suspected was considerable relief. By Wednesday, Marcus had decided instead to resign entirely, accepting a generous severance package that probably saved him from the awkwardness of working for his ex-fiancé's new husband. Sophia, meanwhile, had sent me a long email Sunday night that began with "I am so sorry" and ended with her resignation from the company. She genuinely had no idea Marcus was engaged, and her horror at discovering she'd been the unwitting other woman was palpable even through text. I actually felt sorry for her. She'd been as manipulated as I had, just from a different angle. "She's 25, I told David over dinner Tuesday night at his downtown apartment. When I was 25, I probably would have fallen for Marcus's act too." "You're being remarkably gracious about this," David said, refilling my wine glass. We were eating takeout Thai food on his couch, having decided that elaborate restaurants felt too formal for whatever we were navigating. "I'm being strategic," I corrected. Sophia was a victim too. Marcus is the one who lied to both of us. David studied my face in the soft lighting of his living room. Alex, I have to ask, are you okay? Really okay? Because what happened Saturday night was... He trailed off, shaking his head. Insane? Vindictive? Completely over the top. I was going to say brilliant, but those work too. I set down my wine and turned to face him fully. This was the conversation I'd been both anticipating and dreading. David, I need you to know that I meant what I said up there. About you showing me genuine care and respect. That wasn't just part of the performance. And I need you to know that when I said yes, I wasn't just playing along, he replied. But Alex, we can't build a relationship on revenge against your ex-fiancé. That's not sustainable. I know. I reached for his hand, marveling at how natural the gesture felt. But we can build one on the fact that we actually like each other, have compatible values, and share a mutual appreciation for well-executed strategy. He laughed, the tension in his shoulders visibly relaxing. When you put it like that, it sounds almost reasonable. Almost reasonable is my specialty. The social media aftermath was its own phenomenon. Someone had filmed the entire slideshow presentation, and by Sunday morning, #EngagementPartyRevenge was trending on TikTok. I was being hailed as everything from a feminist icon to a sociopathic monster, depending on the platform. The consensus seemed to be that while my methods were extreme, Marcus had definitely gotten what he deserved. My sister Elena called Sunday afternoon, laughing so hard she could barely speak. Alex, you absolute legend. I always knew Marcus was trash, but this is art. My parents were less enthusiastic. Alexandra, my mother said during our Monday evening phone call, I understand you were hurt, but couldn't you have handled this more privately? Marcus chose to conduct his affair publicly, Mom. He just thought I was too stupid to notice. All I did was provide transparency. By Thursday, the dust was beginning to settle into a new normal. David and I had decided to take things genuinely slow. No more grand gestures or public declarations until we figured out what we actually wanted from each other. But the more time we spent together, the more I realized that Saturday night's impromptu proposal hadn't been as impulsive as it had seemed. David was everything Marcus wasn't, established in his career, emotionally mature, genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. He listened when I talked about work challenges, offered thoughtful advice without trying to mansplain my own industry to me, and had the kind of quiet confidence that came from actual achievement rather than empty ambition. More importantly, he saw me not as a convenient financial support system or a placeholder until something better came along, but as an equal partner worth investing in. I have a confession, he said Friday evening as we walked through the city's art district. I've been interested in you for months. Ever since that networking event where you completely dismantled that venture capitalist's terrible pitch. The one who wanted to revolutionize feminine hygiene products without talking to a single woman? That's the one. I was sitting 2 tables away, watching you politely eviscerate his entire business model, and I thought, now there's a woman I'd like to know better. So, why didn't you ask me out? You were engaged to my employee. There are professional boundaries, and also, I'm not Marcus. The dig at Marcus was gentle but pointed, and it made me realize something important. David respected me enough to respect my previous relationship, even when that relationship was clearly making me unhappy. He'd been willing to stay in the background, maintaining appropriate boundaries, until I'd made it clear that those boundaries no longer applied. I'm glad you waited, I said, stopping to face him under a streetlight. I wasn't ready to see what was right in front of me until I understood what I was actually dealing with at home. And what's that? A man who saw me as convenient rather than valuable. The difference between you and Marcus isn't just success or maturity, it's that you've never made me feel like I should be grateful for the bare minimum. David cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across my cheekbones. Alex, you should never have to settle for the bare minimum. You're extraordinary. When he kissed me, it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. Not the desperate relief of escape from Marcus, but the deep satisfaction of being with someone who matched my energy and ambition instead of being threatened by it. 6 months later, we were married in a small ceremony at David's family's vineyard in Napa. No slideshow presentations, No dramatic revelations, just two people who'd found each other in the aftermath of someone else's poor decision-making. Marcus, I heard through mutual friends, had moved to Portland and was working for a startup that specialized in meditation apps. The irony was not lost on me. Sophia had landed a position at a tech company in Seattle and was apparently thriving in her new role. As for me, I'd been promoted to VP of marketing after my reputation for strategic thinking under pressure had attracted attention from several major clients. Turns out, the business world appreciates a woman who can execute a flawless campaign under any circumstances. Do you ever regret it? David asked one evening as we sat on our back porch, wedding rings catching the light as we shared a bottle of wine. The way we got together, I mean. The public nature of it all. I considered the question seriously. I regret that Marcus put me in a position where I felt like I needed to do something that dramatic. But regret the outcome? Never. Some strategies are messy, but that doesn't make them wrong. Even though people still bring it up at parties? Especially because they still bring it up at parties. It means no one will ever try to lie to me again, because they've seen what happens when they do. David laughed, pulling me closer on our porch swing. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Mrs. Kane. Just remember to always be on my good side, Mr. Kane, and we'll never have a problem. As the sun set behind our garden, I reflected on the strange path that had brought me here. Marcus had thought he was playing me, keeping me conveniently in the dark while he pursued what he really wanted. Instead, he'd inadvertently freed me to find someone who actually wanted me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well, it's living well with someone who recognizes your worth from the beginning. And sometimes, the most strategic move is simply refusing to accept less than you deserve, even if the method of refusal makes you temporarily infamous on social media. I'd built a career on understanding market dynamics, positioning products for maximum impact, and executing campaigns that got results. Turns out, those same skills work pretty well for repositioning your entire life. Marcus had been right about one thing. I was strategic. He'd just been too short-sighted to realize he was never the beneficiary of that strategy. He was always going to be its target. And David? David was smart enough to recognize that being married to a woman who could execute a plan like that wasn't a threat. It was the ultimate competitive advantage. Game, set, match.